The Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest in the world, and we just happen to live in them. One thing we can tell you, there are ghosts in the mountains.
Good evening, and welcome once again to another episode of Ghosts in the Mountains. I am your host, Caleb Hanks, and with me, coasting into spooky season, Count Burgula, Dr.
A week early.
Yeah, a week early. Dr. Captain Austin Burgess, who is neither a doctor nor a captain, but that's not going to stop me. But tonight you're a count. Maybe next week you're going to be a count too. We'll see.
We'll see. Foreshadowing.
Well, welcome once again to our podcast. And tonight is going to be a night that is a little different than usual because, well, we are coming up on the 1-year anniversary of Hurricane Helene, the hurricane that absolutely ravaged and devastated our town, our community, the surrounding communities, the surrounding states.
The whole region.
The whole region was completely and horrifically affected by it. But I will say right out of the gate that one incredible aspect that did come from it, to at least look at some of the positive a year in hindsight, is that we really did see what we were made of during this horrible thing that happened here.
Yeah, I mean, I think events like this really bring out people's true colors. And from everything we saw, not only in Asheville, but across Western North Carolina and across the Southeast, the Appalachian region, the community just bonded together in a way that I've personally never seen. And I think it brought everyone that kind of survived this almost to a sense of, I don't know, more than a community feel. It was almost more like there's a trauma bond that keeps everyone together that lived through that. Like if you run into someone on the street that was living in Western North Carolina this time last year, you instantly have a connection with them, even if you know nothing about them already.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, I know that Hurricane Helene changed the face of what so many communities looked like. We are still recovering from this hurricane.
Very much so.
1 year later.
And that's something that we kind of hope to shed some light on today, because we got some national news coverage. We were definitely on the radar. But by the time the next hurricane came through, the national coverage kind of faded off. So if you're boots on the ground here in Western North Carolina, you very much know what everything has been through over the past year. But if you kind of haven't had that insight, we want to provide that update to you to shed a little bit of light on these ongoing recovery efforts and some of these hardest hit areas that are still very much in the middle of recovery mode right now.
Yeah. And, you know, there are multiple places that are still accepting donations because there are still areas that really, really need funding. You know, some areas were helped out by FEMA. I know recently Chimney Rock was able to get a very good chunk of money, and that is incredible news for them because they were one of the areas that got hit the hardest.
Yeah, for sure.
But we definitely are going to try to shine a bit of a spotlight on some of the areas that 100% did not get a lot of news coverage. Maybe at the time they got a little bit, but basically there were so many smaller communities that were unfortunately, for a lack of better phrases, kind of swept under the rug in that regard. So, unfortunately for our listeners that are typically here to hear about paranormal happenings, there will be a tiny bit of that. But for the most part, this is kind of our duty to our community to continue the conversation about this horrible thing that happened, the impact socially, the impact on people's psyche. I think that some people are going into this September, the end of it, still wondering, like, Is this going to happen again? Is this the new norm?
Well, I could guarantee, just from a personal standpoint, anytime I see a new storm developing, it's definitely a little bit of fear in the back of my mind. Where's this thing going to end up? Because, I with probably a lot of people here, I've lived in the mountains for 20 plus years. I didn't think we would ever see the extent of damage, decimation, flooding that we experienced. And I think that's one thing we're talking about. This probably won't be a normal paranormal episode, but at the same time, I could almost argue that a hurricane coming to the mountains of Western North Carolina is one of the most anomalous things you could have.
Yeah, and truly one of the scariest things that we ever experienced.
Yeah. I think this whole experience was a more terrifying experience for us and the entire community than a lot of the paranormal stuff that we talk about normally on this show. So in a way, if you're here for the spooks, you still might get it.
We don't typically like to do a lot of, murder mystery stuff and the kind of glorification of the gorification of things. And this isn't going to be anything like that, but it is going to be us kind of interpreting a lot of people's stories and just how horrific that can be. And a lot of people can say, okay, you guys experienced a hurricane, big whoop. Well, let's think about for a minute exactly what can happen when a massive hurricane comes through a mountainous region. Now, obviously, areas like Florida and some of the coastal regions, those get hit by hurricanes quite frequently. And it's flatter down there, and we've had enough time in history to kind of understand kind of what happens when a hurricane of a pretty massive magnitude comes through.
Yeah, not only that, their infrastructure is completely designed around that. They have systems in place to be able to account for disasters that they experience down there on a more frequent level.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the mountainous regions of places like Asheville and eastern Tennessee, we were not prepared for that.
Yeah.
The terrain was not prepared for that. When you have that much waterfall coming in, the landslides, roads and things like that were never designed to be able to put up with like floodwaters and stuff like that. And that kind of precipitation just completely evaporated.
Yeah, and not to mention what made things a lot worse for us here was we experienced some pretty significant heavy rain in the 2 to 3 days leading up to the storm.
Yeah.
Our ground was completely saturated at that point. There was no room for any additional water coming in. So by the time the actual hurricane of Helene hits, our ground is so saturated that all the water's just running off at that point.
That was the big 1-2 punch that really just, made the whole thing terrible. So again, we're sorry for any of our regular listeners that were expecting some super spooky stuff as far as, paranormal happenings go.
And we will try to tie in little tidbits here and there. But, as Caleb said, for the most part, that won't be the general vibe of this episode.
But don't you worry, because October's on the way, baby. And we ain't going to leave you hanging. We have got, I'm serious when I say this, I think we've got some of the scariest stuff we've ever talked about on the podcast coming up for you in October. And I'm very, very excited for October. It's our first Halloween doing a spooky podcast, and I could not be more excited. I'm not one of those people that wears Nightmare Before Christmas pajamas every day of the week, all year round, but I love me some Halloween.
Yeah, I think we both have our Halloween decorations up already. So if that gives you any insight.
I got the pumpkins out, but...
Hey, that's close enough.
Yeah.
I have the glowing jack-o'-lanterns out right now. The glowing jack-o'-lanterns.
I thought you were going to say you have the glowing Joe Biden. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, man. It's
well, it's so funny. I was in Salem, Massachusetts this time last year, a week before. I came back a day before is when we got back from New England, and then Helene hits. And when I was up there, I actually did see a glowing Joe Biden. Somebody had this just head of Joe Biden, and the eyes were glowing, and it was like a Halloween decoration. I'm like, hey.
Okay. Like a Frankenstein type deal or something.
Do your thing, Salem. So real quick, there's a couple of shout outs I would like to send out. Number one, first and foremost, Amanda over at Blazin Pines Pyrography. Very, very talented artist, very, very sweet person. Amanda was kind enough to make a very, very, very thoughtful piece of artwork for us. And so pyrography, if you're not familiar, I wasn't familiar with that word, but I knew the art form is, burning and etching into wood and making art out of that. And she made us a just incredible replica of our Ghost in the Mountains logo. And she wrote us to tell us that she wanted to send it. And she also mentioned that she made this out of a tree that was fallen during the hurricane. And I was like, gosh almighty, number one, your talents are incredible. And number two, that's like such a thoughtful thing. I was so bummed because I got so tied up with work this week and I was really, really wanting to get by the post office and pick it up so we would be able to take a look at it while we're here on the air. But unfortunately, I got just so incredibly swamped with work. So I very much apologize for that. But we want to thank you, Amanda, so much for making this and sending it to us. And if you guys want to go find on Instagram, and I believe they're on Facebook as well, but it's Blazin Pines Pyrography. Please go check out her work. She does some really, really, really incredible stuff. I mean, I can't even tell you. I mean, there's Legend of Zelda stuff on there. There's some Lord of the Rings stuff. There's some...
Priscilla Chambers, I think I saw on there the other day.
Oh, that's
one of
cool.
our local drag legends.
Nice. Awesome. Well, yeah. Once again, thank you so much, Amanda. And you guys, please go spend some money at Blazing Pines Pyrography.
For sure. And I just want to say, I really love that it came from a tree from Helene. I heard the term second chance wood, where you're using wood that from trees that fell during Helene and given it a second chance to have a purpose after obviously the decimation that happened during that. So
there you go.
I really like that. Yeah.
That's great. And then we had another listener that wrote us, and unfortunately they had a little bit of an accident.
Yeah, our buddy Steve unfortunately sounds like had his elbow pretty badly injured, but he wrote us, let us know that the podcast has been helping him kind of get through those rough, painful nights. So, man, Steve, I feel your pain there. That sounds pretty rough. Not being able to sleep because of physical pain like that is never fun, but I'm glad that we could provide some form of relief for you, as minor as it might be.
We hope you get feeling better. That's any injury. If you're anywhere near the age of 40, we feel you because, gosh, I can cough and throw my back out. And,
right. You told me this thing a few weeks ago about like being over 30 just means that you're going to wake up and a different body part is going to hurt every day. And that's been pretty much true for the past 3 weeks. So at least you gave me that forewarning.
Hey, I'm not going to name any names about who told me that first. but it was Joshua P. Warren.
Bum, bum, bum. The triumphant return.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember him saying that to me, and boy, was he not kidding. All right. So where are we at, dude? We got a lot of stuff to cover.
Yeah. So I guess jumping into this, I don't know how much backstory context we really need to give on this, but just a brief overview. Last September, I believe the 27th was the day that the storm officially made landfall here in Western North Carolina. This region was decimated by what experts have called, I thought it was a pretty interesting quote, a 1 in 1,000 year event for this region.
How nice.
Which is extreme because, we've always heard the flood of 1916, which was a historic flood that happened, you could probably guess, in 1916. So like there was a little bit of history with flooding in this region prior to this, but the fact that storm didn't really even stack up in comparison to what we experienced with Helene, and the fact that they put this as a 1 in 1,000 year event, not 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000. That's pretty insane to say that all of us lived through that.
That and a bunch of other different stuff. Our dad lore is going to be incredible.
There you go.
We've lived through a lot of weird shit in our lives.
Yeah, and as you could probably imagine with the term hurricane that comes with this, it wasn't just the flooding that impacted us here. We mentioned the runoff from our saturated ground, but it was the winds. The winds are what tore up the trees. We had regions, places up near Grandfather Mountain, up near Mount Mitchell, were experiencing 100+ mile an hour winds, which are legit hurricane force winds in the mountains.
Cannot even imagine being up there at that time.
Yeah. I mean, we could hear it howling from our house, and we're very fortunate for where we live. We're a little bit up on a ridge, and we had no flooding, water, wind damage to speak of. One tree in our neighborhood fell, and it fell right on a fence post and kind of perfectly propped up. So, all things considered, we came out extremely fortunate during this event, and I'm very thankful for that. But at the same time, very empathetic towards those in our community who did not fare as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, just a very brief overview of what I experienced. Our neighborhood, we live near a place where there are used to be a ton of oak trees. Really, really big ones, really, really old ones.
Yeah.
And as the common phrase is that it looked like a bomb went off. My wife and I were without power for 16 whole days. And then Justin Biltonen from our last episode popped up and came to the house. And as soon as he got there, boom, power comes back on. And I'm like,
magic.
all right, he is the magic man.
Yeah.
But our entire neighborhood was blocked in.
Yeah.
And the first whole night, they had to cut us open with chainsaws just to get not us, but the trees, just to get out of there. So for the first 24 hours, I did not even know if my brother or my mom and dad were alive.
Yeah, I think that was the most terrifying thing is we failed to mention so far is that not only were power out, like complete cell service, no cell tower was operational, no internet service, nothing, like
complete blackout.
I think it was probably a few days later when they got some of the cell phones online, or there were certain hotspots you could kind of go to and you'd get that flood of text messages from people that had been trying to reach you. And I remember going and getting text from people that were friends from out of town, from all over the country. And it's just like, dude, are you okay? I'm seeing on the news that Asheville's completely cut off from everything. I'm like, man, this is the first I've heard about it. I don't have access to media, anything. You're breaking news to me.
I just played Phenomicon with the Hitchhiker Band, and Jim Kilgard, also host of the Soul of the Unexplained podcast, and our bass player, John Nyberger. I call him Ron, and, well, that's because I can't be normal, and I love him. And he likes the name Ron now, I think. But I got a text message in the middle of the night with those guys talking in the Hitchhiker Band chat. I found out through them that Chimney Rock had gotten just devastated.
Yeah.
We didn't have access to the news. I found out through those guys, and they're in Colorado and Utah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was finding out from friends in Michigan, friends in different parts of Tennessee. So it was it's a pretty wild experience. And that's what kind of opened my eyes to like, oh my God, we're on national news right now. Oh, so that was definitely put the scale and the scope of everything in perspective for me. But, all things considered, I have to say that Caleb and I really made it out pretty fortunate. We went without power, without water for a few weeks there. But, in the grand scheme of things, it's just kind of like camping with a house.
Oh, yeah. So, and neither of our houses got hit by trees.
Yeah.
Dude, this is kind of a damn near miraculous thing. There was a tree that was gunning for what would have been my office.
Ooh.
And there's this tree right outside. It's the only tree like that's actually like in the fence in our yard. And there's this little tiny branch, dude. I'm telling you, it's probably the size of a baseball, big around. This tree falls from near the road, heading directly for the house, hits that little branch. This is a big ass tree. Hits that little branch, breaks into pieces, and literally falls sideways adjacent to the house within a foot of it.
Man.
I mean, the fact that thing didn't crash through the windows of my office is I don't even know how that happened. So thank you for your sacrifice, little branch. You saved the house and the resale value.
There you go. But, unfortunately, thousands of residents were not as fortunate as Caleb and I. Their homes damaged, destroyed. I've been talking to people past few weeks that are still relocated without their home, trying to move back to their communities and still trying to piece their lives back together. And, that displacement really hits hard, especially, we are coming up on exactly 1 year removed from this. To hear horrific stories like that and the way that people's lives have continued to be impacted, it really hits and weighs heavy. There's a lot that could be said about that. There are a lot of great recovery efforts at that same time, but that was really the biggest, most devastating piece here. On top of, like we kind of alluded to, our infrastructure just wasn't set up to withstand this. We had dams failing. We had, sections of I-40 were completely washed out. This is what my friends were meaning when like Asheville's completely cut off. The major interstates coming into town were completely washed away or damaged to where we couldn't even receive truckloads for the first few days.
Dude, what's the reservoir that you can see from Mount Mitchell? The North Fork?
North Fork, yep.
I had heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I had heard that if that dam had broken, it would have been like, oh, brother, where art thou? A situation where, I mean, we had flooding. Dude, there would have been entire communities completely underwater. Like, if that dam had given.
Yeah.
And it was close.
And yeah, that's the thing. You hear some of this, in disaster situations like that, there is a little bit of the misinformation that starts to spread. I heard rumors about dams breaking and flooding. It really meant that they failed, which wasn't the exact situation. But yeah, there were those scary possibilities and scenarios put out there that just summoned some really terrifying mental images.
There was a clip that they were playing on News Radio 570, which is, the radio became the only lifeline.
That was I was sitting there going to my car for the media releases or whatever they were doing every day just to give an update on status of power, water, supplies, anything like that.
Mark Starling and Tank Spencer were up there at 570.
Yep, they were locked in, right?
They were doing, and they were doing the Lord's work, man. They were just trying their damnness to, give a lifeline to people. Anybody that could get cell phone service, they were trying to get them on the air and let people know they were out there, they were stranded, they didn't have resources, that kind of thing. So, hey, dude, Mark Starling and Tank Spencer, thank you guys so much. I actually worked at the radio station at 570 AM back in the day when Tank was up there.
I don't know why I never connected those two till now, but that's kind of wild.
I worked there at that radio station for a minute. I was in the old building, which was the jam. But man, I miss that job. I really do. It was pretty well. I don't miss it as much now. We got the podcast.
There you go. Same basic format.
Yeah. Sorry. I'll stop talking.
Oh, you're fine. But yeah, as you can imagine, this is a pretty scarring experience for people, but it wasn't just the people that were left with the scars, I should say. The land itself was literally scarred. There are, mountainsides that are stripped completely bare by landslides. Some of these high wind conditions that we talked about caused thousands of trees across the region to fall into just tangled piles. I don't know if any of y'all have had the opportunity to get up on the Parkway. A lot of sections of that are starting to slowly be reopened, but there's still a lot of down trees that they're just working to kind of clear out and chop away, and that's going to take years for them to completely clean everything up there. But
not to mention the Parkway going up towards Mount Pisgah, and then the Parkway going up to Mount Mitchell just reopened. Saw that. Like I think. Headed towards Pisgah was 3 weeks ago, and then Mount Mitchell was like a week ago.
Yeah, this week that happened. Mount Mitchell Park is not open yet.
Yeah.
But the road going up there is.
That is how long it took them to reopen the Parkway.
Yeah, and it's hard to really grasp or visualize until you go and see it for yourself. We were kind of fortunate where we lived. I could kind of walk to the Parkway, get easy access to the Parkway from where I'm at. So within the first week, we were walking up there, but that was pretty sobering to see. We probably saw hundreds of trees alone within our few hikes up on that. So just putting that into scale was pretty wild.
No doubt.
And also factoring in, NOAA actually did release a story map recently within the past week, which kind of covers a lot of the statistics of the storm. And there was nearly $79 billion estimated in damage from Helene, which is one of the costliest storms in U.S. history.
That does not surprise me at all. Dude, so you're talking about seeing the scars in the land. If you guys go on YouTube and you follow an account that is at Mark Honeycutt, Mark Mark-Huneycutt, Mark Honeycutt, he's been covering Helene since it happened, and he's been like pilots this thing. I don't know what it's called, but you have the parachute and then you have a big fan on your back. There's this famous Simpsons episode where Mo is flying around saving babies. But he his most recent video, it was 3 weeks ago, and he flies directly over Chimney Rock, and he has some incredible footage of Lake Lure and how it ain't so much of a lake no more.
And not only that, some of the river, I don't remember the exact name, feeding into that.
Oh,
the whole landscape, the whole not direction, but just the width of that, the way the water flows was completely changed just by the landscape being rerouted, essentially.
That's why I was bringing up the video, because you have to see how much that, number one, how much it changed the landscape, and then number two, how much that area is still destroyed.
Yeah.
Now, they have been able, from, I think, the Bat Cave entrance, they've been able to get that road paved, but I think between there and Girton, it is still pretty dicey. But again, here we are a year out, and that's the progress that's been made.
Yeah, imagine, we're still seeing this a year out, so you can only imagine the week of when this is happening. There's these conditions left so many communities just inaccessible to resources to rescue. There were helicopters coming in to pull people out of some of these villages, out of these places where the main roads had been completely cut off from. So the response came, but as you could imagine, no one really anticipated a storm of this magnitude hitting us. So the response was there, but the timeliness of that was a little bit varied for people. So there are people that were stranded for a little bit longer.
And not to mention the access to be able to get up here. The interstates have washed away.
Yeah.
I-40 is still complete. If you look at the gorge heading from Tennessee on I-40, dude, that thing is, it's next level. They are still very much in repair mode.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago that another portion of it washed out and they had to fix that.
Yeah, it's honestly wild for me to think about.
It's
It's something that, I think there's a little section later in here, but it's alluded to that when I was informed of the hurricane, I sort of brushed it off because, I've like I said, I've lived here for 20 years. I'd imagine we get some wind, we might lose power for a day or two, and there'd be some heavy rain. Never in my lifetime did I think we would experience something like this.
We weren't around in 1916, or were you, Count Bergula?
I don't think anyone besides maybe some vampires were around from 1916.
Yeah, but they're fine. They're all in Dillsbury.
As you will learn next week.
Yep.
But anyways, I didn't really anticipate this, and leading up to it, I think as the week went on, as I start to see the spaghetti models all start to curve our way, I'm starting to get a little bit more worried. I'm starting to listen to Adriana's advice, like we need to fill the bathtubs, we need to load up on supplies. And the night before the storm, I'm watching a WLOS, our local news station, just a live broadcast, and their weatherman is basically hunkered down in the studio trying to give everyone live updates on the storm. And you could tell he's trying to straddle a very fine line from like not causing mass hysteria in the community, but also like trying to put the most sincere warning out there that he could. Like he's almost having a panic attack on the air from what I could describe. And like that really made it set in. I'm like, oh boy, we're in for a night.
Yeah, I didn't see that. I was on the road. I was driving, dude, I was driving 14 hours straight from Salem, Massachusetts overnight. Well, the night before that, I guess it would have been.
Fair enough. So before we get into, I do want to kind of get into some stories from listeners from the community and just provide some updates on some areas. But we did promise we would try to provide a little bit of threads to some paranormal aspects of this. So I did kind of want to mention one brief element here. And I think I've talked about some of this on previous episodes about the concept of just paranormal hotspots or window areas, as John Keel would call them. And the term kind of basically refers to a region where frequent high strangeness or paranormal activity occurs or reported. And one of my favorite researchers in this field and probably biggest inspirations, Christopher O'Brien, actually put together a list of characteristics that all these hotspot regions seem to have in common based on years of his investigation. And up until just last year, I'd always kind of tried to find ways for like, yeah, Western North Carolina definitely checks all these boxes and fits into this, but there was always one that was kind of left off the list. I didn't have a real explanation for. Rare weather phenomena. And boy, a hurricane in the mountains is about as rare as you can get in that aspect.
Yeah, it might be few and far between, but we have them.
Yeah, rare. That's the key word there. So, in our case, I can't think of any rare phenomena more anomalous than a hurricane in the mountains. And, I'm not saying the storm itself was a result of high strangeness or anything like that. But to me, the occurrence of it in this area kind of really solidified Western North Carolina is checking all those boxes finally to be considered that true paranormal hotspot.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, Brown Mountain Lights aside.
Yeah, Brown Mountain Lights aside, the whole region.
Those are real rare.
Right. But, before we get into some of the stories and recovery updates from across the region, I did want to talk a little bit about the concept of omens. And now an omen is a phenomenon that's believed to kind of foretell the future, often signifying a change being brought on. It was commonly believed in ancient history, and still believe some today, that omens are somewhat of a divine message from the gods. And I do want to share a story of a potential omen that occurred right before the storm happened. And this story involves an omen that's widely believed across Hispanic and Latin cultures. And the story comes from someone that's very near and dear to my heart. If you're a frequent listener of the podcast, you've probably heard the name a few times by now, but I'd like to officially welcome my partner and soon-to-be wife, Adriana, to share this experience with you all.
So my name is Adriana. I don't know if you guys heard of me or not. But yeah, like Austin said, I have a slightly spooky story I wanted to share with y'all. So the weekend before the storm, I was actually in South Florida visiting my mom. And that Saturday, we were sitting on the couch watching the weather to see if we can go to the beach that afternoon. And I remember them talking about the storm named Hurricane Helene that was going to be making landfall in Florida within the next few days. And I looked at those models that they had projected, and I was like, oh my God, I think this thing is going to hit Asheville. Like, I don't think we're going to be unscathed from this. And I remember sending you that text message and you being like, no, nothing happens in the mountains. We'll be fine. It's okay. And I was like, no. We need to get prepared. Like, I'll get as prepared when I get home. So fast forward to Monday, I got everything we needed. I got food and water and every sort of hurricane supply that you can think of. And then when I got home from work that Thursday, I think at that point they were projecting at the very least high winds. So I was like, oh, let me put away everything in the yard so that nothing would be a projectile. And as soon as I turned the corner to go to the side yard, I looked down on the ground and there was a dead black bird. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, this is going to be so bad. And for those of you that don't know, not only are Hispanics incredibly superstitious, but seeing a dead bird, specifically a black bird like this, is usually a really bad omen. And it kind of ties to like a broad superstition of birds being messengers from the spirit world. So whenever they act erratically, like hitting a window or being found dead near a home, or even getting shit on by a bird, which is apparently a good omen, the only good omen, although the jury's out on that one. But yeah, it's basically any sort of erratic behavior like that is usually has spiritual significance. So here I am looking at this dead black bird thinking, oh shit, it's going to be bad. And so I finished everything I was putting away. I dug a little grave for the bird and buried it, said some little prayers because I'm superstitious, and then went on with my day. And we all know how that next morning fared for everybody. And I think in hindsight, not only was that a bad omen, but I've never seen a black bird like that in our yard when I think about it. Like, we have robins, we have chickadees, like we have cardinals. There's so many birds, crows, ravens, but that didn't look like a crow or raven. So I think that was definitely some kind of sign, some kind of omen, obviously. And yeah, then we all know how the storm was, and I'm just really grateful that we're now at a point where we're in recovery mode and we're getting through this together. And I love this episode that you guys are doing, and I hope that the listeners appreciate it just as much.
Well, thanks again, Adriana, for sharing that with us. And man, I tell you what, it's weird, you know, even if you're not like super superstitious or natively associate some sort of thing like that with an omen.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just see weird little stuff like that and you're like, that just feels a little off.
Yeah.
You know?
Just like heavy.
Yeah. I think if I had seen a black bird dead in my yard the morning before Helene, I would have been a little creeped out by that as well. A little creeped
out. Yeah, she didn't tell me that till after the storm either. So yeah, that was a little bit like, oh, well, maybe you were onto something.
See, I didn't have any intuition about that thing at all. I came back to town. I was like, I'm home. I'm so happy. I had a cold coming on, but I was like, it's beautiful outside. And then
it hit.
And then no power for 16 days.
Yeah. So with that, I do want to move on to some of these stories that we've heard. We've seen a lot of stories from listeners, from members of the community about their experiences surrounding the storm. And I will say some of these stories are extremely personal and even difficult for some people to kind of talk about or relive. So with this episode, we do want to be extremely cognizant that some of these stories could trigger a lot of emotion from what was a pretty horrific experience for so many people here. And we want to recognize and be respectful to that fact and know that some of these stories aren't really ours to tell. But we do want to bring you some that some of our listeners have shared directly and given us permission to share with you, as well as just some updates from people across the region and some of the harder hit communities, providing some of the recovery updates and efforts of what they've been seeing in their areas. But with that said, I did want to share what I think is kind of a really awesome story of community support that came from one of our listeners, Diane. And as we mentioned earlier, the aftermath of the storm, many of the towns were left without power, water for weeks, leaving some of these communities in a bit of a bind for food, really. So Diane, her husband Rick, and a crew of other friends and families, they formed together. It was people from Hudson and the Morganton area, assembled what they called the Caldwell Convoy, and they traveled through to some of these heavily impacted areas, such as Burnsville, bringing along enough hot dogs, hamburgers, and green chili stew to make sure that any of the hungry community members were fed and taken care of. And they said they wanted to show their love for the community and everything they've been through by providing them a hot meal for support, which not a more appreciated or better way to do that.
I mean, God, so many stories of just people coming from all over the place. I mean, God almighty, I've never seen just humanity at its finest.
Yeah, exactly. That was such an awesome example of what we saw happening all over Western North Carolina. Like those who had access to power, water, and the ability to cook, they graciously accepted the task of feeding those in less fortunate situations. You know, I could think of like countless restaurant owners in the area who, you know, might have been able to operate through food trucks, propane grills, generators, some sort of alternate method to be able to actually get their food prepared for the community. And they put profits aside and we're giving meals out to anyone in need, no questions asked. So I think that, you know, where we are in the region of Asheville, I could pretty much drive up and down the main thoroughfare road, and it'd be hard to not find a restaurant that was really just diving in headfirst into the community support.
You ain't kidding.
So yeah, I want to shout out to my boys, Drew, Brian, Luke, and the guys at Beer City Pizza. They were passing out free pizzas during the storm. Rosita's Kitchen in downtown Asheville, they were really at the forefront of this. I understood how many meals they were prepping, but I saw an interview where they were saying they were prepping as many as 1,000 meals per day sometimes to pass out to community members, just almost box lunches.
Dude, I got to shout out to Beer City Pizza. Holy crap, you guys are awesome.
Dude,
their pizza is next level. I'm not sponsored. This is like, holy crap. Oh my God.
They're actual homies. Drew's a big listener of the pod, so
he
will hear this. Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah.
That's amazing, dude.
So if you want to hear our pizza recommendation in Asheville, you've got it right here.
That's hilarious. I had no idea that they were fans. That is the best pizza I've had in this town.
Yeah.
Mind-blowingly good.
Yeah, and great dudes too.
That's so badass, dude. That makes me so happy.
For sure.
Go get some Beer City Pizza, fam.
Also want to shout out Bear's Barbecue. They worked with the World Central Kitchen to help kind of distribute meals in the aftermath. And, you know, these are just a few examples of the countless businesses that really did what was right to make sure the community was taken care of. And even on the neighborhood level, I mean, everyone's coming together to make sure that neighbors had what they needed, supplies, food, whatever it was. My next door neighbor actually drove out the morning after the storm, came back with his truck bed loaded with cases of water, and he's driving up to every house in our development, just making sure everyone has 2 full cases of water for the bare minimum there. And you know, on top of that, we're having community cookouts in the cul-de-sac where everyone's kind of bringing their grill out, any salvageable food, anything that they need to get cooked off, and we're out there sharing everything, making sure that everyone's taken care of. Neighbors with generators, we're letting people use fridge space to keep food good for the next few days so we could continue to have these kind of neighborhood community cookouts. And that went on for probably really 2, maybe even 3 weeks until we got the power back. But it was something it was a nice social bonding experience when you're going through something that's kind of as tragic as that and you don't really fully grasp it. It's nice to be able to connect with other humans that are your exact same boat. Like, they also don't know what's going on. They know nothing more than you do, but we're all in this together.
Yeah, it kind of made you feel like you were in, the times of the settlers,
Yeah, no joke. On the first night of the storm, actually, a lot of us were kind of sitting out in a circle of chairs in a neighbor's driveway having some drinks. And I think I mentioned this in a previous episode maybe, but we did notice a glowing object floating across the sky. And of course, everyone's first reaction, oh my God, is that a UFO? But, within a few seconds, it became obvious that we were looking at a Chinese lantern, which had been released not far from us. And at first, I kind of took this as a symbol of remorse or loss or sorrow, maybe potentially in remembrance of a loved one. But I've actually recently looked into more significance on the symbology behind Chinese lanterns. I learned they're actually used to symbolize the triumph of light over darkness, representing hope, good fortune, and the dispelling of evil spirits. So in that context, I think that's a lot more inspiring of a event that we witnessed.
Well, I don't know if you got a chance to listen to our episode with the whole thing of our episode with Justin when you were in Colorado, but, Justin had speculated that after he came back to town from Nashville after Helene, it was the first time he'd ever seen it.
Yeah.
That he experienced something that I'm not going to give away exactly. I want you guys to hear, how he tells it in his words. But he felt like he was experiencing some sort of like negative energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a little bit of a different take on that, but it is interesting that you bring that up, in the context of the whole thing.
Yeah, for sure. And on top of that, there are numerous community organizations and support organizations that really played a crucial role in the direct support efforts for this region. Support and donations were really coming in from across the country with organizations like Beloved Asheville, which I think was kind of at the forefront of this. They were working to accept and sort, deliver, and redistribute food and other supplies across the region. And I was out of work for about a week when everything was kind of still on the fritz, not knowing what's going on. So I actually had the opportunity to go and volunteer with them for a few days when I was out of work. Spent one day kind of sorting deliveries, one day unloading a truck, and then one day I was out on the road literally delivering food and supplies to some of these really decimated areas. And God, that was a really rewarding experience for sure. But they've really did a huge effort. It was humbling to see just the amount of donations coming in from neighboring communities from really across the country. There are breweries from halfway across the country that were canning up water, sending specifically to Asheville to donate for this. There are people, whatever they could find, whatever way they had to support to help. It got to a point to where Beloved Asheville's warehouse was completely filled. They could no longer accept donations. Luckily, Highland Brewing is located right down the road from them. So they actually opened up their warehouse space to provide Beloved to continue to keep accepting these donations to keep things rolling.
Hell yeah.
So that's
when Oscar Wong was still alive.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So
man, I'd seen some videos of some guys that had come up here as part of the Helene relief to help clean up trees and fix power poles and all that stuff. They're still here.
Yeah.
They just stayed. And
That's
they're down in between Girton and Chimney Rock, just still helping clean everything up, dude.
There's plenty of work still. So and by giving shout outs to this, I'm not saying that the help from FEMA and other federal organizations wasn't appreciated. I admittedly took full advantage of the FEMA mobile showers at the Walmart parking lot they had set up when we were out of water. But just the scope of the destruction from the storm was so much greater than anyone could have predicted or anticipated that the federal support could only go so far with a lot of the resources, being rightfully dedicated to some of these intense rescue missions. So to say that Western North Carolina wouldn't have made it through or been able to recover in the way that we did without the support efforts from the direct community members is an understatement for sure.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. And just seeing the way the region came together in the aftermath, it really kind of reaffirmed my love for not only the city, just this region as a whole.
Well, I before the hurricane happened here, I think that just, in modern everyday life, it does I think it's easy sometimes to become cynical about things.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's a lot of just, everyday little bullshit that compounds on you.
Mm-hmm.
Helene was like the slate cleaner.
Yeah, nothing matters anymore.
All of your little bullshit that you deal with every day we're tabling that for a minute because
Yep.
you're gonna see what it's like to not have basic necessities.
Yeah, exactly.
For multiple days on end, for weeks on end, and we're gonna see, how you interact with your neighbor. And I thought that was such a beautiful thing through that was like there wasn't fighting; people came together.
Yeah.
And when you look at societally and on the internet, there's so much just pissing on each other over everything. But it was such a beautiful instance to step away from that. And even in the face of just like horrific things, and I know a lot of people lost family members, they lost entire families to this disaster. At least we did have the silver lining to see society come together and be like, hey, we are brothers and sisters, and we're going to take care of each other for this little bit. And that, I mean, dude, yeah, I still get a little misty-eyed thinking about that whole situation.
Sure. So, I mean, I guess with that being said, I think it's a perfect time to kind of shine some light on some of these regions that were the hardest hit that are still very much in the middle of recovery efforts. And, I think we alluded some to Chimney Rock, the Lake Lure area at the start of the episode. So let's just jump into some of that right off the top here. We've discussed some of the legends, paranormal legends of these areas in previous episodes. And if you haven't heard those, would definitely recommend those because those two are really some of my favorite episodes. Maybe I just love that region so much that I like hearing about it. But for me personally, I really enjoyed that one, or those ones. We discussed the Cherokee legends of the little people in the area and some of the strange humanoid figures hovering over the rock itself. So definitely a fun one to check out if you're not familiar with that one.
I know I've said it multiple times on those podcasts, but Lake Lure and Chimney Rock, those areas are literally some of my favorite places on the planet.
Yeah.
Because it's just some of the most epic scenery ever. And Lake Lure is one of the most chill lakes ever. I just kind of go up there to recenter myself.
Right.
And to see that place just encounter the devastation that it did. Oh my God. It's like heartbreaking doesn't even start to describe it, dude.
One thing I did notice when I went back and listened to that episode, I somehow failed to mention this or skipped over this in my notes, but actually John Keel himself wrote about Chimney Rock and some of these strange experiences in his book, Our Haunted Planet. And he concluded that Chimney Rock is one of the countless haunted places on this haunted planet. And I could only imagine that statement is even more relevant in the aftermath of Helene. So just to give you some brief context here, their main street, their business district was largely destroyed. In fact, a large chunk of that road itself was washed away. Many of these roads were impassable. The water, sewer systems were destroyed. Bridges, including the one into the Chimney Rock State Park, were washed away and severely damaged. And as we alluded to earlier, the Broad River's course was visibly altered in places due to this extreme flooding. It's definitely one of the areas that had the heaviest impact, but the silver lining is there is a little bit more federal support going down to that area right now. But I saw one kind of sobering statistic that roughly 1/3 of the village's 46 businesses were destroyed outright. Many of the rest were heavily damaged. The village lost at least 20 homes, with many more having serious damage. And keep in mind, this is a extremely small village, population maybe 150.
And it used to be a very small river.
Yeah,
Not like a creek, but it was it was pretty small. And I think at this point in certain areas, it has more than doubled the width that it used to be.
Yeah, for sure. And with this being kind of a small community that it is, it does heavily rely on tourism when many of these businesses remain closed for months and even up to a year later. Chimney Rock State Park was just able to reopen in June this year, late June of this year, after a pretty extensive cleanup and recovery effort. So if that's a place you've never been, highly suggest taking a day trip up to visit the rock itself. Take the opportunity to support some of the businesses in the area. And
I told this story when we did the episode, I think it's episode number 3 about Chimney Rock, but I'd never been to Chimney Rock my whole life.
Yeah.
And then I think it was June before Helene. Me and Micah and Charlotte all roll up there.
Yeah.
And I got some beautiful footage of the gorge as it was.
Oh, it was, yeah.
And I'm very glad that I did get to see it from up there before that happened.
Exactly. And, obviously stop by Lake Lure while you're there because, the lake itself is still drained as cleanup efforts continue, but there's still a lot of cool things to do in that area. The historic and historically haunted Lake Lure Inn is open, accepting reservations, visitors. And one of my personal favorite spots out there is a meadery named Fay Nectar. and their property took some heavy damage as pretty much their entire landscape was offered. It was first time going there, it was like this once lush green field out back, and now when I went back previous of the storm, it was covered in layers of sand and dirt that had just been displaced from the storm, but the actual building remained intact. So we had the opportunity to go down there for their reopening / anniversary party a few months ago. And while you could kind of still feel the heaviness and everything, it was also really inspiring to see the resilience of a place like that survived, that made it through, that went through the reopening, the recovery efforts, and had that community support there. It's another must-visit location in the area, like legitimately, especially if you're like a fantasy fan. It's one of the only pubs that has that feel that you're walking into a literal pub. It's somewhere in Middle Earth, something like that. So it's such a cool area. Definitely recommend that. And the last aspect I do want to touch on is the Flowering Bridge, which is located right outside of Faynectar. It was basically a bridge that had been repurposed into this kind of mystical garden with rare plants and artwork and other features that it really just had this real magical feel to it. And sadly, that bridge sustained pretty significant damage during the storm, and it was deemed unsafe and eventually torn down recently. And you know, this definitely hit home to me because I'd never really had the experience to fully experience the Flowering Bridge in its true form. But it was just announced that this whole area, Chimney Rock, Lake Lure, did receive a bit of FEMA federal funding for this, and some of that funding is going towards rebuilding the Flowering Bridge, which is a huge aspect and win for that community.
Yeah, happy to hear that they're at least going to, you know, do something with that. I'm glad I got to experience the Flower Bridge because it was, man, that was incredible. I mean, it was like a straight botanical garden.
Yeah, exactly.
On there, so
with a little bit of like Alice in Wonderland mixed in.
Very much so.
Yeah. The next area I do want to shed some light on is the small community of Hot Springs in Madison County. And we've talked a little bit about Hot Springs before, particularly in the Madison County Bigfoot episode, where we kind of discovered that this little area was kind of its own hotspot for Bigfoot sightings.
Yeah.
With quite a few of them tied directly to Hot Springs and some of the campgrounds in that area.
Somebody got a little Eskimo kiss from a baby Bigfoot.
Yeah. We also mentioned some of this area in the French Broad River Siren episode, discussing the area known as Paint Rock, which was one of the potential alleged spots. But its legend probably didn't occur. But anyways, that's a story for another time.
That's a story that we debunked for another time. A time in the past where we already did it.
So, as you can imagine, a town named Hot Springs is named for its natural mineral springs, geothermal water there. Cherokee communities really viewed this as sacred healing waters. And, you know, by the late 1800s, Hot Springs was starting to become a famous resort destination. So the town's also unique because this is one of the few and potentially only towns that the Appalachian Trail directly passes through. So this brings in tons of hikers every year in addition to the regular tourism for the hot springs. So getting to this town's kind of viewed as a treat or something to look forward to for hikers that have been on the trail for days or weeks or even months. The prospect of a restaurant, cold beer, and stores to stock up on supplies is probably a pretty welcome one amongst the hikers. But life there is also a bit precarious because it's located basically between the steep mountains and the French Broad River. So Hot Springs is very, very vulnerable to flooding almost down. It's located down almost in a valley area. So past storms have come through and left scars, but when Hurricane Helene came through, that really hit the community especially hard, not only isolating them, damaging roads, but pretty much tore up every single business on that strip and pretty much threatened the entire way of life for them down there. The resort itself, I think they lost quite a few of their mineral hot springs tubs. I believe some of those have been repaired and back online by now, but that was a pretty big hard hit for what was a big draw for people coming to the area to begin with. I actually spent a good bit of time in that community from my beer sales days. My friends Tim and Amanda that own the Spring Creek Tavern have really been through one of the most intense cleanup, repair, and recovery efforts in this area. So, as you can imagine by the name, the Spring Creek Tavern sits right on the Spring Creek with the outdoor patio directly above it there. You could probably guess how that went during Helene. The entire patio was destroyed, washed away, as well as an entire side of the restaurant's building. So we're basically a year removed from the storm, and they're still working to reopen the restaurant. Although, from what I hear, they're anticipated to be right around the corner from that. But they're great people that could really use the business and support once they are officially opened. I just ask that you come into the area with a healthier amount of respect and understanding that recovery is still an ongoing thing for them. I actually spoke with Tim recently, and he told me about a confused tourist kind of coming through that had no idea the extent of damage that was caused. And he just kind of looks around and he asked Tim, and he's like, hey, did something happen here? Like, seems like a lot of the businesses are closed right now. And Tim's just like, well, yeah, we had a hurricane. And the guy's like, oh, I heard about that, but like didn't really understand that it hit you guys this hard. So I think that's a direct example of just how, if you're not boots on the ground in this area, you really can't grasp the scope of what everything's been through.
Well, honestly, I also feel like the media coverage got cut a little short, frankly.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying for whatever reason. There was another pretty significant storm that hit Florida within a week or two after us. So I think that disaster coverage just, it shifts as, no pun intended, as the tide does.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Milton impacted a lot of people down there.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that they could not have come back and shifted more focus. True. Because, again, this cleanup it's going to take over a year.
Yeah. I just think when you're in the breaking news world, it's all about the latest, what's happening at the time. So I think, unfortunately, we fell a little victim to that. Not saying that we were completely brushed aside, but there was other events that maybe took up some of that prime coverage. Another funny story that Tim shared with me, he overheard another frustrated tourist complaining about how inconvenient it was that every business in town decided to renovate at the same time.
Oh, how inconvenient for you.
So we both just kind of had to laugh and roll our eyes at that one, but it's like truly a prime example of the obliviousness that people have to what this area is still continuously going through.
You ain't kidding. I mean, dude, frog level over in Waynesville, they didn't have it as bad as they probably could have. I know they definitely experienced some stuff because they're like right next to the creek there, whatever that is.
Yeah.
I'm assuming their back area is at least a semblance of what it used to be. I just haven't been over there.
Yeah, same. And that's just the thing. Like, we're trying to shed light on some of these areas, but we're going to miss some things. And I hope that that's not perceived as a sign of disrespect. These are just areas that we do know were hit the hardest, and we have some sort of personal ties or connection to, and feel that we could maybe assist by shedding light onto some of this.
Yeah, there's a whole region to cover. We're not going to get
everything.
Sorry, fam.
Yeah. So moral of the hot spring story is try to be understanding and empathetic as you can when visiting some of these areas that have really been through the ringer the past year. So, just a little bit of empathy goes a long way. And go see Tim and Amanda once Spring Creek Tavern officially opens the doors. And I guess you'll let us know if you see any Sasquatch while you're there too.
Go live out your boiled egg cosplay in Hot Springs.
Exactly. Now the next place I want to shed a little bit of light on is the Biltmore Village. And as you could probably guess, this is the village area located right outside the Biltmore Estate and the infamous Biltmore House. And this one really hit close to home for me because, I mean, literally, it's close to home for me, basically 3 miles down the road from where I live. And just the drastic difference in impact that those miles can make was pretty eye-opening to me. At one point, the entire Biltmore village was completely submerged by the floodwaters. And you've probably seen some of these photos. If you've seen anything, like these are the ones the media were sharing where the water is almost like all the way up to the top of the Wendy's sign. Many of these buildings had to be demolished, and others are going through some pretty significant renovations and repairs because you can imagine the historic Biltmore Village has some historic buildings there that they're making efforts to do everything they can to save some of those buildings there, specifically in the proper village area. Not so much, the Wendy's, the Moe's, those are gone. But
yeah, I mean, dude, honestly, like Biltmore Village, it still looks awful down there.
It really does.
It is not good. Ichiban was one of my favorite restaurants in town, but Hey, baby, they're coming back. And not only are they coming back, well, they're coming back in the old Cracker Barrel on Tunnel Road. And boy, am I excited about that.
Yeah.
That it's not going to be a Cracker Barrel.
There you go. I will take sushi over Cracker Barrel any day.
Yeah, I don't even feel like it's a decision you have to make.
Yeah, exactly. And this does actually bring me to the one kind of new paranormal or ghost story that I want to share today that we have not talked about in previous episodes. And while it doesn't directly relate to Helene,
Please don't let this take place in the old Cracker Barrel.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, good.
The haunted. No. It actually comes from the aforementioned flood of 1916, and I think it'll resonate with some people just based on some of the similarities that we've seen between these historic events. And the local legend is that the water rose all the way to the point where you could only see the steeple of the All Souls Church in Biltmore Village during the flood of 1916. Some of the people, they were trapped in the floodwaters, found refuge by trying to cling on to the steeple at the top of the church. But as you could imagine, after a few hours, the wear and tear starts to set in. People are getting fatigued. People are getting tired. And the legend goes that slowly, one by one, people start to lose their grip, to fall off the steeple, and to be rushed into the floodwaters. And not a single person survived that experience. And supposedly, people hear thumping noises and see strange shadows around the top of the steeple to this day. Is that one you're familiar with? Have you heard that one before?
Never had.
Yeah, that one actually comes from Joshua P. Warren. But yeah, that also brings us to what I would say is the last place that I want to sort of shed some additional light on. And really, I think this is the area that was not only probably the heaviest, hardest hit, it's one of the areas that to this day is in the most need of recovery right now. And that is the area of Swannanoa. Now, Swannanoa sits just east of Asheville, basically along the Swannanoa River. But as you can imagine, being built along a river valley means that this town was a pretty high risk for flooding. And that became even more apparent when Hurricane Helene hit. Some of the statistics from this area, the Swannanoa River itself reached a record crest of 26.1 feet, which broke old records from the 1916 flood. The Davidson River Bridge in Swannanoa collapsed due to the floodwaters. Homes were pretty much decimated, being destroyed. I could speak to this, but I think we would be doing a disservice because I feel that this is one of these instances where this isn't exactly our story to tell. But we did have a listener that wrote in sharing their direct experience being boots on the ground in Swannanoa when this happened. And I think that this is one it's really tragic. I think it really puts into perspective the firsthand view of what was going on in some of these areas that were literal ground zero for the storm.
100%.
So I'll start off with this. Thank you to our listener, Heather, for submitting this. This is a really touching one. It starts off, I woke up at 6 a.m. on the 27th of September thinking that my sound machine volume was malfunctioning, but realized that it was the sound of the wind outside in the dark. And then the alarms began. On that day, I was living in the Grovemont community in Swannanoa, an elevated neighborhood full of old trees backed against the mountains. I rushed downstairs to make coffee as the power was still on. I knew it would probably go out in a short amount of time, but in the many storms and hurricanes that we've been through, it was never for too long. I had bottles of water saved in case we went into boil notice. The power went out the instant I was pouring that first hopeful cup of coffee. Then the tree started to fall. It sounded like the whole world was falling. A huge locust fell into our duplex and shook the building. I woke my teen and had him come down so we could be safe on the bottom floor, just to wait for this to pass. Then the rain started in earnest. We lived in a low part of the neighborhood at the bottom of a hill. And typically, we would get most of the runoff from the storms, but it got higher and higher until 3 feet of rushing water was almost over the front porch. We had to open the windows because the water near the floor caused pressure to build, and it just got uncomfortably hot. I felt the foundation tremble and was so scared the building was going to be carried away. Later, I found out it was a landslide that took out houses just down the road from us. I was in communication with my worry partner in Candler up until the alerts got extremely urgent that the North Fork Dam had failed. Then the phones died, and we had nothing. Honestly, we were all clueless after it stopped. The sun came out, the birds began to sing. It was a wild cacophony. We saw a bear creep through the yard, foxes, hawks, owls. It was surreal. We decided to walk around and see the damage to find out when we could get out. The entire neighborhood seemed to be walking and driving in circles. There was so much confusion. The hill down Old 70 had a huge tree blocking it, so we walked down and held the branches for others to pass and stood in shock. The Swannanoa River was right there, and we could see across to the interstate. The trees were gone, and the water was as wide as the Mississippi, raging and carrying cars, sheds, and, well, it was terrifying. I think we all stood there for a couple hours as it rushed through storage, facilities, and homes until we all walked back slowly, wondering if we were all lost now. We were on an island, and the roads were gone. Surely no way in or out. Over the days following, the neighbors formed teams to clean up, cook food thawing in freezers, and give aid, hand out medicine. We were able to get out in about 2 days, but no one could find water. Finally, the helicopter brought in bottled water, and others was brought in from other areas. I couldn't reach my partner. I remember writing him text, hoping they might go through. The last one was, "If you get power back, and only then, I think you can try and get us out." The next morning, I was sitting on my porch with my neighbor in tears when he crested the hill. We grabbed as much as we could and put my senior cat in my son's lap to evacuate to Candler for a month. That was its own tale, but no words can capture Swannanoa and the months of mourning over the destruction, the dust, the trash, the clear cutting of trees from frightened neighbors. I'm in Candler now, but memories are still raw, especially so close to the anniversary. Yeah, that one hits hard. As I can imagine, it's almost that bit of survivor's guilt. Like, I'm sitting here like, oh yeah, I basically camped in a house for 2 weeks. Then you hear a story like that, and you're like, we had it real good.
Oh man, and number one, thank you so much for sharing that story with us. I think that encapsulates so many people's experience.
Yeah.
And Swannanoa, again, when our friend Justin Biltonen came on the podcast for the last episode, that was one of the areas that he went to go deliver some supplies before he and I got together, and he had basically a paranormal experience.
Yeah.
He was genuinely, when he got to our house and used his magic to turn the power back on, when he sat down and talked to me about this stuff, and this was the first time that he had seen any of this, Swannanoa was the number one area that just shook him.
Yeah.
To his core. I mean, he's a stoic dude. He's, big, strong looking homie, but he just, he said seeing Swannanoa, he said the smell out there was one of the big things. He was just like musty, dead things.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just like something he couldn't, he was visibly processing this, and God almighty.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things for me with this is the other areas we've talked about, Chimney Rock, Lake Lure, Biltmore Village, Hot Springs. In their own way, they're almost their own tourist destination. They have a little bit of business infrastructure going on there. Swannanoa is an unincorporated community, and they've had to heavily rely on community support and organizations for recovery efforts from places such as the Swannanoa Grassroots Alliance and the Swannanoa Resilience Hub, which is, I think we could officially make the announcement now that with some of the Hurricane Helene benefit relief designs that we did, where we were raising money for some of this, we have opted to, we've done a lot of research. So this wasn't a decision we made lightly. We wanted this to go to areas that really needed the most support right now. And that really is the Swannanoa Resilience Hub, that after talking to people from that community, and I actually had the opportunity to speak with Tonia Allen, who is a member of both those organizations, and she provides some direct insight and on-the-ground updates from what she's been seeing over the past year, what they're currently doing on these ongoing recovery efforts, and what they could use to help for further support. So with that being said, I think this is a good way to really wrap up the episode and let someone that's been a lot more involved in a literal boots on the ground aspect in the community recovery and just ongoing efforts. Kind of talk us out and tell us about some of the efforts here. So I think this is a good way to close out the episode.
Yeah, and I just want to say, we started this podcast around 3 months after Hurricane Helene.
Yeah,
it was still very fresh. We started at the beginning of the year in 2025, and one of the first things that we thought that we could try to do for our community in the event that somebody would listen to our podcast is we wanted to, make some t-shirts, and every single sale was going to go to help those affected by Helene. And I want to thank all of you so very much for buying these shirts. 100% of the proceeds of those are going to help the community that you are about to learn a little bit more about. And I think after listening to this, you're going to understand why Austin and I chose Swannanoa. Because again, like Austin said, places like Chimney Rock, although we absolutely love these places, they have been able to get a decent amount of attention because of things like Chimney Rock. But Swannanoa, North Carolina,
an unincorporated community that's, pretty, I won't say left to fend for themselves, but as you'll hear very shortly, probably not far off from that.
In a lot of ways they were.
Yeah.
And Swannanoa is kind of one of those places to where if you are coming to Asheville and you don't know much about the surrounding areas and you hear about Black Mountain and you want to go to Black Mountain and maybe check out some of their breweries, some of their restaurants, you can easily bypass Swannanoa by just taking the interstate. There is a highway that connects Asheville and Black Mountain, but the GPS probably isn't going to tell you to go through there. You might not even know that Swannanoa exists, but it's a very wide expanse of territory, and there's a lot of people that live in between Black Mountain and Asheville.
Yeah, deep-rooted communities that go back generations there.
And when Justin was here at the house telling me about going out there and, taking supplies, he said, dude, if you had told me that an A-bomb had gone off, I'd believe you.
Yeah, I've heard that sentiment from multiple people, truck drivers that were coming through, because you could see the damage in Swannanoa right off I-40 as you're coming up over that hill. So,
all right. Well, we are going to hear from Tonia Adams right now, and this is why your money that you have been gracious enough to spend, this is where it's going, and thank you all so very much.
So the Swannanoa Resilience Hub is the nonprofit, or we are a nonprofit organization, and we were sort of birthed from the Swannanoa Grassroots Alliance, which is not a nonprofit. It's just a collaborative of neighbors.
Understood.
I call it a community of doers, and also call it the doocracy sometimes, because if you have an idea, you do it.
Hey, that's the way to go.
Yeah, and it really was an amazing neighbor response to Helene, and it started, we at the local Swannanoa Fire Department was one of the few areas where you could get a cell signal in the immediate days after the storm.
That was crucial.
And so people would, figure that out, and they showed up, and it just started with neighbors meeting in the parking lot, trying to, figure out what to do and who had what and who needed what and where to go for information and how to get that information out to their neighborhoods. And I would say similar efforts were happening in multiple neighborhoods across Swannanoa. So the fire department is in the Beacon Village neighborhood, but over in Grovemont, Grovemont is an E.W. Grove neighborhood that was intentionally designed around this hub and spoke model. So there's this central library and green space, and so another sort of natural hub just happened because people just wandered to that shared community space and started doing things, and some pretty incredible things happened over there as well. And then eventually some of the community leaders that were in Grovemont kind of made their way across the river as they, once they could, and came to this fire department. And from there, it sort of grew into one of our local business owners had some empty space, and so people were able to go and meet inside. And then the Grassroots Alliance just kept sort of evolving into more people showing up. And we have a very gifted community member who is a brand designer, graphic design. Like, she's just very gifted and talented and has this educational background. And she created the Facebook page and website for the Grassroots Alliance. And so she is now employed by the nonprofit, and she does all of the Swannanoa Resilience Hub website, social media, Facebook page. And so I think that once the Grassroots Alliance, was lucky to have her, because she understood the importance of being able to get credible information out onto social media, so that there could be more engagement. And so then there was, naturally more engagement in people who were coming into the area whenever there's a disaster. And let me just, I'll be transparent. This is my first disaster, so there's been a really quick, steep learning curve. But I can see that when there's a disaster, people come in from other areas. And it was helpful that they could see on Facebook, where they might be able to find what the needs were. And so her name is Sierra, and she's been really instrumental in those early grassroots efforts days, and she's incredibly instrumental in our efforts to communicate with our community, what resources we have to offer and hear what people need. So anyway, the Grassroots Alliance, it grew. We would sit in a circle. You'd go around, you'd introduce yourself, you'd say what your needs were, what you had to offer. And oftentimes challenges were met just before you even got all the way around that circle. And as we started moving through recovery, and some people recovered, and they have to go back to work, and there's less engagement in these meetings, and the meetings have really dwindled down, and we could see there was a need for long-term recovery work. And the only way to make that sustainable is to introduce some organization and create this nonprofit so that we could fundraise to support the community and also to support the people who are doing the work. Because community volunteers can't volunteer forever. And so we formalized into a nonprofit. Now, Swannanoa Grassroots Alliance is its own. It's still that neighbor collaborative. It still exists, and they still have meetings twice a week. And then we operate space that supports those meetings to continue to happen. And as the Swannanoa Resilience Hub, we have developed a disaster case management program. So we provide it's free assistance to disaster survivors in the Swannanoa Valley that need help navigating the complicated recovery. And they can access our services either through our website, but also through the Buncombe County Long-Term Recovery Group. We're one of 6 agencies that is partnered with the Buncombe County Long-Term Recovery Group to provide disaster case management services. So we have a case manager on staff. Her name is Mary. She's amazing, resourceful, kind. She lives in Swannanoa. She, had her own story of impact from Helene and knows firsthand how challenging recovery is from this storm. And so we're really thrilled to have her and with us providing this service. And we're also operating this community space and partnering with other nonprofits in our area that are doing really amazing work and have been. So we partner with the Neighbor Care Clinic, which is free medical services through the Swannanoa Valley Christian Ministries, and they operate a couple days a week out of our space, providing free nurse visits, and then they have sick visits as well. So we also partner with the Pisgah Legal. They have their Justice Bus, has come to several of our events. We have a Swannanoa Farmers Market. Swannanoa is ground zero, and we were deeply impacted. We have no grocery store. We have no post office. We lost our hardware store. We've lost all of our, what you would call third spaces, those places where you run into your neighbors. And so operating the community space and supporting these meetings and creating intentional programming, so creating events, is really important. So we have a Swannanoa Farmers Market that was originally started by one of our board members, Dina Lytle, and she really, man, she lifted that off the ground all by herself. It's been an amazing gift to the community, and that has been folded under the umbrella of the Resilience Hub now so that we can support it and help it grow. And so we have a farmers market. We've had over 45 vendors at various times with the market, and we fold recovery resources into this market. So you can access Renew NC caseworkers. You can sign up for our case management. The Neighbor Care Clinic is often there. Pisca Legal is often there. So we are folding in recovery resources, but in this comfortable setting of the farmers market. It's a great way. People from this area don't like to ask for help. And so it's a good way to show our community that help is available in a non-threatening way. And if someone comes to the market and they don't need help, but they see Renew NC with the rebuild program sitting there, they can share that information with their neighbor. So it's just a really good way to get these resources on the ground and accessible in a comfortable setting. And the other mission of the farmers market is just to get some food into this area so that you can come and buy some fresh vegetables. And we don't have, it's a new farmers market, so we don't have a vegetable vendor. And what we do is we actually partner with Mountain Foods that's out of the WNC farmers market. One of our neighbors who actually lost his home in Beacon Village, he works with Mountain Foods. And so originally he was, we were working with him, and he was bringing and tabling that produce to get that produce into the area so people have access to buy fresh produce. And now we have taken that on, so we're actually buying that produce and bringing it in. And it's a biweekly farmers market. It's not a perfect solution, but it's at least an opportunity for people to come and buy fresh vegetables. And then wherever possible, we're also trying to bring in free access to food for people who need it. So, a good example is this Saturday at the farmers market. We have a group out of the FFA from like Fort Mill. I want to say it's Fort Mill, South Carolina, the high school there. Tim Paysauer, who used to be the FFA teacher here at Owen High School, he's now down there in Fort Mill. But they have grown and harvested a bunch of sweet potatoes, and they're bringing them to our farmers market, and we will give those away. So those will be free to anyone who needs them. So we're trying, to bring in free resources, and we're working toward having a free food pantry. We're getting that set up now. We have gotten a donated commercial refrigerator. We're working with partners to try to access free food for this community because we do have a lot of incredibly vulnerable folks living here in Swannanoa. There's been a huge loss of affordable rental housing in this area. And I'm concerned. We have a lot of displaced neighbors, people whose kids go to school here. They want to come back to this community, but the rental homes are no longer available. And we see that as a huge gap that needs to be filled. And though it's not necessarily under the umbrella of what the Resilience Hub can do, it's certainly something we're aware of. And affordable housing is a personal passion of mine and an area where I've worked before. And so, I'm looking at ways that we can support replacement affordable rentals in the Swannanoa Valley because we desperately need them. 15% of the homes in Swannanoa were mobile homes, and many of those have been destroyed. And it's really difficult here. Yeah.
Tragic. Yeah. I mean, first of all, let me just say, you all have obviously gone above and beyond with some of the recovery efforts you've done, and I commend you for all the efforts. It seems like you've created a really just almost one-stop, I want to say solution, but almost just like one-stop hub for the community there, and that's a huge resource in itself, and that's amazing to hear. I guess in terms of the continuous ongoing long-term recovery, is there anything in particular that you would like to shine light on in regards to ways that members of the community or members of other communities in surrounding regions might be able to help contribute in any sort of way?
Well, that's a great question.
I understand. I know that's probably
well, I mean, the question, it's a simple answer, and it's probably not one that's unexpected, is funding, but really directing funding to the people on the ground doing the work. I have seen, we're just one of many amazing organizations that are doing incredible work. We are working with organizations here on the ground that are quite literally, rebuilding homes and putting people back in homes, small nonprofits that are coalescing skilled volunteers and raising money and rebuilding homes and just getting that work done to support their neighbors. It's incredible to see the kind of work that's happening. There will be the money that comes through the government. So there is this money for the Renew and See, the rebuild program, and that is, they are actively taking applications. But those programs are, they're not going to be able to serve everybody because you have to meet certain requirements. And I think it's really important, and one of the things that we can do with disaster case management, and one of the things that long-term recovery groups can do, is help to leverage those funds wisely. Like, people who can participate in those programs, get them in the program so that they can become whole again. They can, I think, there's some reimbursement for damages through that program. There's rebuild and repair through that program. And then the people who cannot qualify, because there will be people who won't fit under that umbrella, if we can then use funds from the nonprofits that are a little more flexible funds to help those folks recover. And that's where case management is so important, because we can look at the bigger picture and try to guide everyone to a full recovery. FEMA funds are not designed to make people whole. It's just the way the program is designed. It's not meant to make people whole. And so we can help guide people to, use the multiple resources at their disposal to become whole. So I think the need is funding. It's just always funding. I mean, our business corridor was absolutely hammered. There is no money for small businesses. Statistics for communities to recover when their business community doesn't recover, it's not good. We need our small businesses to recover, and they don't receive, they're just precious few grants for businesses. So, many of these businesses already have loans, and then they have to go out and take now another loan to recover. And then how do they survive? We have businesses, even the ones that were not physically damaged, they are economically damaged. They've lost a tremendous amount of business. One of the efforts that we are supporting is just coordinating. My son coordinated a bluegrass jam at one of our local restaurants, and that happens every Thursday evening. And they've just started, but it just to support local music, to support community, so community can hang out together. I mean, what an awesome thing to be able to go on a Thursday night and listen to these guys play music and have a beer and eat some great food, and then also so we can support this restaurant. And so the Resilience Hub's part of that is that we're able to, promote that and help do some coordination for that event. And it helps to support community. And resilience is place, it's the space. It can mean, we're working toward building out a more permanent location, and we're looking at things like adding solar for backup power. We're looking at space and place, and how does resilience look as far as your space, but also resilience in community connection. I mean, you build resilience in just neighbor to neighbor, neighbors having someone to call on. The silver lining of this storm is I have more have more friends than I've ever had in my life. It's absolutely amazing.
I understand that. We've harped on that countless times, that it's just tragic as everything was, that it really showed you just how strong the community here is. And obviously, especially down in Swannanoa.
Yeah, the way neighbors show up for each other, it's this is a special community. I knew it, but I really know it now.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
And just so I know, what is the restaurant that the Bluegrass Jam is taking place at? We'd love to promote that and stop by as well.
It's at Terra Nova, and that's on Whitson Avenue. It's 204 Whitson Avenue, and that's 6 to 9 on Thursday nights. And they had the first jam was last Thursday, and it was just a huge community turnout. And I don't know, I think there were like 14 or 16 musicians. It was crazy.
Oh,
and,
awesome!
The next one is
just kind of shows up with an instrument and can
everyone.
Join in.
Yeah. Anyone. It's an open jam, so it's not you're not required to be skilled. And I'm not a musician, so I won't explain how that works. But musicians understand kind of like where they fall, in that. And but it's the nicest group of people, and then the community comes and listens and hangs out, and it was wildly successful, the first one. And we're hopeful that it will continue to be, a really an event that the community embraces. And, it helps to support a restaurant that has lost a lot of engagement from, there's been economic damage to this restaurant. And we love them, and we want them to be in downtown Swannanoa. So we want people to come and enjoy a beer and eat some great food at Terra Nova.
Yeah, understood. Well, we will do everything we can to promote and push that as well, and as well as the both organizations, and any sort of links that we could put in our show notes for our listeners to find. We'll definitely do that to make sure that anyone hearing this is able to directly go back and find not only the organization's websites, but find ways that they could help support as well.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And we're on social media as Swannanoa Resilience Hub, and we also have a Swannanoa Farmers Market. So please, that's a biweekly farmers market. Please come check us out. And we're actively seeking, vegetable vendors, meat vendors, bread. We're trying to create more partnerships with farmers market vendors. We're kind of it's a brand new initiative here, but I think Swannanoa is ready for it.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it. And like you said, it's a great community building effort, somewhere you could go and run into friends, neighbors, members of the community that you wouldn't see otherwise.
Oh, yeah. And we have children's activities and music and, just all sorts of great stuff. So every market's a little bit different right now. So,
yeah, completely understand. Well, again, thank you for taking the time to speak with me. I know you have a meeting coming up, so I don't want to take you or hold you for too much longer, but if there is anything else you'd like to share or any other stories, experiences that you would like to talk about, I'll give you the floor for the last little bit here.
Just thank you to my community and to the wider Western North Carolina community, and to Buncombe County and the Buncombe County Long-Term Recovery Group, and all of the people that are working so hard, whether you're working in a formal way supporting disaster recovery or in an informal way supporting your neighbors. It's been pretty powerful to witness how much we can do when we work together.
Definitely. I love that message. And again, thank you for sharing all this with us and with our listeners. I think people will really appreciate that. And I think it's going to really hit home and impact people and hopefully shed some awareness and light onto a lot of these areas are very much still in recovery mode right now, which I think is lost on some people that might not be local or boots on the ground in some of these areas.
Yeah. We are still in recovery mode, but there's beautiful things happening. We still need help. Don't forget that we need help, but we are also, we're experiencing renaissance in community connectiveness, and it's pretty amazing to see.
Well, I love to hear that. And again, anything we could do to support, we will definitely put the resources out there. And, Caleb, my co-host, and I will see if we come down and attend one of the bluegrass jams ourselves and make it out to the farmers market. Hopefully,
Awesome.
hopefully direct some listeners and friends down there as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thank you for taking the time to speak with me again.
All right. Thanks. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Well, I think that very much speaks for itself.
Get your ass down to Terra Nova and their bluegrass jams and go support this organization in any form that you can.
I might actually maybe come out of retirement,
Oh, yeah.
get the old mandolin out of storage and go down to Terra Nova. Do you know what night their bluegrass jam is?
Thursday nights.
Oh, well, hell.
We might have to rearrange.
What are we doing tonight? Well, again, I think this paints a very clear picture as to why we chose to take all of the proceeds from the t-shirts that we have sold through Ghosts in the Mountains and give to the community of Swannanoa, because I think that they really were one of the communities that was hurt the most. And Tonia put a ton of information out there for you guys. And if you are feeling generous and you would still like to help some of the struggling communities, all the information is there. And man, this one has run a decent amount long, but I am very, very glad that Austin, number one, you've put in the time and effort and research that you always do into this specific thing, albeit not, something typically paranormal like we usually do. This is still something, even a year out, that deserves a hell of a lot of attention. This community still deserves a hell of a lot of attention. We are still building. We are still rebuilding. We are still coming out of this. We are still traumatized. We're still not out of September. We're still a little freaked out by that because September is when the hurricane
season is here.
And, look, man, fingers crossed. Let's hope that is not the new norm.
Right.
But
Let's make it through this spooky season and to the next spooky season.
let's hope that we all get to enjoy the beauty and the majesty that is the fall here in this region, because, man, it is a sight to behold. And I think a lot of people felt kind of robbed of that experience robbed of that and many other things after Helene.
joke.
So, here's hoping. And all that said, this is a wonderful, although sometimes hard to talk about, hard to hear, experience to go through some of this stuff again. I'm glad that we did talk about this, and I'm glad that we were able to allow people to talk a little bit about some of this stuff a year out in hindsight, and still promote some of the efforts that are still very much ongoing and needed in the communities in the area. And on that note, Austin, is there anything else you'd like to say before we close this thing out?
I'm good. I think we've rambled enough for one night.
That's true. And I genuinely hope that we can just kind of remember everything that happened, remember the people that were lost, remember how awful it was. But finally, after this, in some ways, be able to just move on.
Move forward, but take the lessons with us, because I think, as we touched on, there was a lot of silver linings, a lot of good that did come out of the bonding experience, if nothing else.
100%. This
Yeah.
city, this town, this community is forever changed. I think in some ways for the better, obviously some ways for the worse. We lost a lot of good people, but I am a consummate optimist, and onward and upward, there is only upward to go. At least we hope.
There you go.
So, once again, I would like to thank everyone for hanging in there and listening to us. Thank you so much for listening tonight, especially, and, enduring some stuff that's, not what we typically do on the podcast, but nonetheless, something we felt very compelled to talk about, and something that's still very, very important and near and dear to us and our experience here. And God, thank you everybody that wrote in. Thank you everybody that bought our Helene series t-shirts, because your money is going to help a community that really, really still needs it after all this time. And I don't know. It's still kind of wild. I'm still honestly kind of processing a lot of it myself after, hearing some of these stories again. And beginning our journey out of the darkness and into the light. As Darren Marlar from Weird Darkness says, he's the guy that got me into spooky podcasts, so I bring him up every once in a while.
Nice.
I love his show. I can't just listen to our podcast because we do it. We live it. But thanks again so much for your support and listening to the podcast. Thank you all for reaching out and letting us know that you're enjoying what we do. That means a ton to Austin and I, and we always try our best to get back to everybody's email, and sorry if it takes a while. But if you want to learn more about what we do, please go to ghostsinthemountains.com. You can support us on Patreon for an ad-free version of the show. And all that said, I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful dovetail into spooky season. And please, buckle up as we stay spooky, everybody. See you next time.